Barbara Walters, Harry Reasoner bring you the news.
Good evening. It was not until shortly after noon in Washington today that Gerald Ford appeared before newsmen at the White House to concede that he had lost one of the closest presidential elections in recent American history. He conceded with grace and style and dignity, as we'll see. Barbara?
Also tonight, Howard K. Smith comments on the difficult and sometimes unpopular work that lies ahead for Jimmy Carter. We'll see the president-elect and his family and his friends on an emotional morning after in Georgia. Likewise, in Washington, President Ford and his family in their public appearance, urging all Americans to unite behind the next president. Pollster Lou Harris will be here to tell us how Jimmy Carter put together his winning combination of electoral votes and how a history-making coalition of whites and blacks put him over the top. Harry?
If any further proof is needed tonight that yesterday's election was close, consider the fact that in both Ohio and Oregon, no winner has been declared in the presidential race and may not be for days. That's how close it is in those states. We can see how the different regions of the country voted on this election map. The 22 states projected for Carter are in blue, the darker color if you're watching in black and white. Carter also won the District of Columbia. The Ford states are in yellow, the lighter color, 26 states in the president's column. Carter was very strong in the Deep South, strong in the populous states of the East, and in the border states. The president won most of his electoral votes in the Midwest, the Southwest, and the West.
Well, nevertheless, Harry, the next president will be Jimmy Carter, and our ABC News count shows these projected electoral votes: 272 for Carter, only 2 more than the absolute minimum needed by the winner, and 235 for Mr. Ford. With more than 90% of the popular votes counted, Jimmy Carter's margin remains at under 2 million. The way it was all through the long night of counting, about 40,276,000 for the winner, and more than 38.5 million for the loser.
In the final frantic hours of campaigning, President Ford exhorted his supporters for a home run, a touchdown. Today, appearing in the White House press room, the president said to reporters, "We lost it in the last quarter." Tom Jarrell has more on Mr. Ford's concession appearance this afternoon.
With daylight came the grim reality. Mr. Ford went to bed believing he might still somehow win. But at 9 a.m. Eastern Time, his top aides marched into his office and said it was over. The president assembled his family, and because he had nearly lost his voice campaigning, asked his wife to read a telegram after he spoke briefly.
I do want to express on a personal basis my appreciation and that of my family for the friendship that all of us have had. Let me call on the real spokesman for the family, Patty.
The president asked me to tell you that he telephoned President-elect Carter a short time ago and congratulated him on his victory. It's been the greatest honor of my husband's life to have served his fellow Americans during 2 of the most difficult years in our history. The president urges all Americans to join him in giving your united support to President-elect Carter as he prepares to assume his new responsibilities. I'd like to read you the telegram the president sent to President-elect Carter this morning. Dear Jimmy, it is apparent now that you have won our long and intense struggle for presidency. I congratulate you on your victory. As one who has been honored to serve the people of this great land, both in Congress and as president, I believe that we must now put divisions of the campaign behind us and unite the country once again in the common pursuit of peace and prosperity.
Appearing fatigued and emotionally drained, Mr. Ford walked through the press room greeting reporters. He accepted the close returns as final and demanded no recounts. He showed no bitterness either toward Mr. Carter or the newsmen who had pursued him down the long campaign trail. Tom Jarrell, ABC News at the White House.
If the mood at the White House today was somber, it was in turn ecstatic and tearful last night and today in Plains, Georgia. President-elect James Earl Carter Jr., with as little sleep as everybody else, in a thoughtful and thankful mood, thanking those who backed him and already assigning staff members to work with the White House to make sure of a smooth transition to the highest office in this country. Sam Donaldson has spent the entire political campaign with Jimmy Carter, and these last few hours were no exception.
Jimmy Carter may have taken a nap this morning, but not a long one. He didn't get home until shortly before 8, and President Ford was on the phone around 11. But that was a call Carter said in the mid-afternoon statement he was glad to receive.
I deeply appreciate the call from President Ford and his gracious expression of congratulations and cooperation. I express my admiration for him and for the strong, well-planned, and effective campaign that he ran. I'm particularly grateful for his offer of close cooperation during this transition period between the election and Inauguration Day, and also during the next administration. One of the very first tasks facing any new president is the unification of our country after a close and hard-fought election. President Ford's characteristically gracious statement today will make that job much easier for me.
Carter said transition arrangements are already underway between the two staffs. He promised to elaborate in a news conference tomorrow or Friday. Then the plan is shaping up for Carter to vacation somewhere away from Plains, perhaps in Georgia, perhaps in the Caribbean. Shortly before dawn this morning, Carter returned to South Georgia, his daughter Amy in his arms, from his Atlanta victory celebration. Returned to Plains, where relatives and well-wishers had been waiting all night. His brother Billy. His mother, Miss Lillian. And when he spoke, there was exuberance, sudden emotion, and a solemn pledge.
I told you I didn't intend to lose. I came all the way through 22 months, and I didn't get choked up until I... This next couple of months, I'll be doing the best I can to prepare myself to be a president, of which all of you will be proud. And I believe that I can make the kind of leadership in the White House that can tap the greatness that's in all of you.
It is fair to consider the closeness of the race and what it turned on, the narrowness of the mandate and the difficulty ahead in exercising it. But the fact remains, Jimmy Carter, to use his own words, was a man who didn't hold public office, who didn't have much money or a big campaign organization, who came from the South, but overcame it all to make political history, and now promises to do his best to go on to make presidential history. Sam Donaldson, ABC News, Plains, Georgia.
Well, the perception by some that Carter might be more anti-business than Ford resulted in a burst of heavy selling when the stock market opened this morning. At one point, the Dow Jones Industrials were down 16 points, but there was a partial recovery later, and overall the market closed substantially, but not dramatically lower in moderate trading. On the New York Stock Exchange, the Dow Jones Industrials were down 9.5 points to close at 956.53. Standard & Poor's was down 1.18, and the American Stock Exchange Index was down 0.52.
I'm in love, and I take Geritol. You see, my husband and I try to take really good care of our health, for ourselves and for each other. And so I eat right and exercise, of course. And I take Geritol to make sure I get the iron and vitamins I need.
Geritol? To be sure you get enough iron, more than twice the iron of any ordinary supplement, and some very important vitamins. Take a look at who takes Geritol.
Geritol, every day.
Shouldn't you?
I guess I'm just like you. Like everyone, I have trouble falling asleep once in a while. There are times when the soothing sound of the river won't even help me. So you know what I do? I take Sominex. I take it as directed, and Sominex is safe and effective. Sominex makes me drowsy. Before you know it, I just drift off to sleep.
Sominex, America's #1 sleeping aid. If you sometimes have trouble falling asleep, let Sominex work for you.
Sominex sure works for me.
There is a constitutional provision prescribing the duties of the vice president, but there's no law that says the vice president-elect cannot be just as happy as the man at the top of the ticket. Consider Walter Mondale last night in Afton, Minnesota.
Thank you all, and we'll see you all at the inaugural. Thank you very much.
And they all thanked him, and they all thanked each other, and they celebrated for a while. Jim Walker brings us up to date on Mondale's activities today.
Walter Mondale had only had 2 hours of sleep, but aides said he was flying. Accompanied by wife Joan, he showed his sense of humor when asked if, like most vice presidents, he would be neither seen nor heard.
Tomorrow morning I'm going to Plains, where I'm meeting with Governor Carter and outlining the duties that he will have in my administration.
Mondale said Jimmy Carter had agreed the vice presidency should not be used as a ceremonial office. Mondale saying he hopes to put his Senate experience to work.
And I think it's important at long last to overcome what has been a growing gap that exists between the executive and the congressional branch of government. That has to be overcome, and I think that I can be helpful in that regard.
Mondale says he thinks it was the bread and butter issues, unemployment and inflation, that won the election. Said an aide, now all we have to do is find jobs for the jobless. Jim Walker, ABC News at Mondale headquarters, Minneapolis.
Carter and Mondale may have won the election. They had no trouble at all winning Mondale's home state, Minnesota, but they managed to lose in Afton, where Mondale lives, 650 to 580.
There is probably no one in public life who fades faster from the spotlight than a vice presidential candidate who lost. That is the prospect now facing Robert Dole. Dole was at the White House last night watching the returns with President Ford, and today he faced reporters in Washington, and Herbert Kaplow was there.
It had been a long night for him, too, and when Dole entered a Senate committee room with his wife this afternoon, he was a much more subdued figure than the man who had campaigned more than 60,000 miles during the past 10 weeks.
It was a good campaign. Of course, we're sorry to have lost, but we certainly wish Governor Carter and Senator Mondale the best. I'll still be here where I can help them. I don't know, I've been saying, if you work 3 more days, we'll work 4 more years. Well, I knew at the time that I still had 4 years on my Senate term, and I'll be working very hard in the Senate. I don't know what beyond that.
Dole was asked whether he would take on a national campaign again.
When?
Herbert Kaplow, ABC News at the Capitol.
We'll be back to tell you about the important Senate races after this.
Most people think of their homes as a sound investment, one that continues to increase in value. Savings and loan associations agree. They finance more homes than all other financial institutions combined. In fact, over 80% of their investments are home loans. Home ownership, a sound investment for you, a sound investment for savings and loans. Savings and loans. Who needs them? We, the people, do.
In
Introducing a remarkable new nasal spray that lasts and lasts up to 12 continuous hours. Introducing new Duration, the nasal spray that relieves up to 12 continuous hours. Duration helps relieve nasal stuffiness and sinus congestion. So just one use lets you work all day. Just one use lets you sleep all night. New Duration relieves and relieves up to 12 continuous hours. And that's Duration.
You know something terrific about FinalNet? Watch. It's a spray mist, not a cloud. I'll do it again. See? A mist, not a cloud. So I can spray exactly where I want, all over, or just on this curl. And of course my hair is going to stay in place, because none of the leading hairsprays can beat FinalNet for hold. No wonder FinalNet is the #1 non-aerosol.
The makers of Metamucil, a fine laxative, would like to recommend something else. Nature. Nature has the means to keep you regular, but when you occasionally need help, remember Metamucil is made from grain, not chemical stimulants. So it relieves easily, gradually, comfortably. Try to follow nature's directions. When you don't, try this laxative made from grain. If not nature, Metamucil.
9 incumbent senators lost their seats in yesterday's balloting, but the Democratic-Republican count remains the same, 61 Democrats, 38 Republicans, and 1 independent. But the makeup of the Senate will be different. Numbers aren't everything, as Frank Reynolds tells us in this report.
The numbers remain the same, but the Senate will not. New, but not necessarily young faces, and no clear message from the voters to accompany them to Washington. Some are coming simply because others stayed too long. Hartke of Indiana, trying for a 4th term. To the well once too often. Enter Lugar. McGee of Wyoming. Moss of Utah, committee chairman, movers and shakers, ousted now by men until recently unknown in their own states. A wallop. A Hatch. Buckley of New York, the quiet man of principle, the conservative who called for Nixon's departure while his liberal colleagues were silencing their consciences. Beaten by Moynihan, the loud man who served Nixon and praised him. Taft, ousted by Ohio, a heritage and a name no longer enough, not to defeat a Metzenbaum, not twice in a row. Schmidt of New Mexico, the moonwalker. Victor over Montoya, the aimless questioner. Now we'll have a Senator Sasser, a Tennessee supporter in the early days when the president-elect was still Jimmy Who. Bye-bye Bill Brock, back to the candy store. Zorinsky of Nebraska is coming here. Zorinsky of Nebraska, a Democrat for almost a year. And finally, Sayonara Tani. Hello, Hayakawa. Age conquers youth. That's what they always say and believe in California. Some good ones are going. Hopefully, no bad ones are coming. A mixed bag, a new bunch. Good luck to them and to us. This is Frank Reynolds, ABC News, Washington. The Democrats have retained their 2-to-1 margin in the House. With 5 races still undecided, the Democrats have won 288 seats, the Republicans 142. As a rule, incumbents held their seats.
In the 16 contests for governor, 9 Democrats and 5 Republicans won. Dixie Lee Ray, the former chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission and a Democrat, won the race in the state of Washington and became the 2nd female governor in the country. In Missouri, Joseph Teasdale, a Democrat lawyer, upset incumbent Governor Christopher Bond.
In his comment tonight, Howard K. Smith reviews the advantages President-elect Carter will have upon taking office and the problems he'll face. Howard?
The tumult and the shouting will die quickly now. Indeed, there wasn't much tumult to make subside till the last days of the campaign. But hard, unpopular work must begin quickly to alter some basics that people change skeptically and not always willingly. Mr. Carter's job will be tough, But he has unique advantages. The old leaders of Congress have all retired. New ones will now take over. There's a record number of new faces in Congress. Mr. Carter is new, as only our first all-out Southern president in a century can be new. We must hear from him that word so abhorrent in the campaign, sacrifice. We're not going to make it without it. Consider the facts we face. The ratio of elderly people will increase. The diminishing ratio of working people must bear the burden. Fuel prices will rise, as well as food prices, from the demand of millions more mouths to feed in the world. An economy badly feather-bedded with thousands of special unearned benefits has to be purged. Americans have got to learn the principle of receiving what they contribute and nothing more. It can be done if Mr. Carter is a genuine leader. Remember, Churchill's offer of nothing but blood, sweat, and tears united a whole nation behind him. And Kennedy's single most striking words were, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Those must be Mr. Carter's guideposts. It can be done if approached wisely. It's a difficult mission, but he must remember, nobody forced it on him. He asked for it, and he got it. Barbara?
Thank you, Howard. New Jersey and the East will finally get casino gambling similar to Las Vegas. Yesterday afternoon, a referendum made it legal in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Environmentalists lost their battle yesterday in most states to impose strict controls on nuclear power plants. The only one of 7 states to approve it was Missouri. Massachusetts voters said no to a tough proposal to stop the sale of handguns. Colorado voters turned down a proposal that would have given them the right to reject any new taxes. Both Colorado and Massachusetts voted overwhelmingly to support their state's equal rights amendment, and Maine and Michigan voters banned throwaway beverage bottles and cans.
1 ounce of whole wheat total has 100% of the recommended daily allowance of all these important vitamins and iron. I'll pour this Leading Natural cereal. Stop me when you think the vitamin value equals totals.
Stop.
Not yet.
Now?
No.
You're kidding.
It takes at least 16 ounces of any of the Leading Natural cereals to equal the vitamins in 1 ounce of fortified total.
That's some difference.
That's the total difference.
Amana announces its 3-door refrigerator freezer with the only automatic ice cube and cold water dispenser that is completely separate from the doors. And inside, Amana's independent refrigerator and freezer controls. The refrigerator within a refrigerator has its own temperature control to keep meat fresher longer because super cold air surrounds the outside without drying the meat. The Amana 3-door refrigerator freezer with automatic ice cubes and cold water.
Sears rolls back prices to 1973 levels on Sears steel-belted radio with the heritage of taming the tough roads of the world. Baja, Africa, Greece, Morocco. Regular prices reduced $27 to $67 a set. Get radial construction with 2 steel belts. 1973 prices are back on Sears steel-belted radio. Only at Sears.
Sears National Automotive Sale. The Sears 48, a maintenance-free battery. A battery you never add water to is now on sale. The Sears 48, now only $29.99. You save $10. And if you need new shocks, ride on into Sears. Sears heavy-duty shocks are on sale now, just $4.99 each. You save over 30%. Only at Sears.
Lou Harris, the eminent analyst of public opinion, has been consulting with and polling for ABC News ever since the New Hampshire primary. He's now had a dozen hours to digest what happened last night, and we've got him here to ask a couple of questions. Lou, we talked about it being a squeaker. Was it really that close? Could it have gone the other way, or was this built in?
Harry, it could have. Jimmy Carter ended up with a 2.4% lead, which in a normal election one would say is fairly clear-cut. But once you got outside of the South, this vote was dead even. In other words, it was even across the country, and we got to the big states, those big industrial states in the North. Carter ended up with less than a 1-point lead.
There seem to be a lot of people today who were saying that Mondale and Dole made the definitive difference. Did they?
Barbara, I think the polling we did convincingly shows that Senator Fritz Mondale did make a difference. When we pitted Carter and Mondale against Ford and Dole, consistently, Carter and Mondale won by 2 or 3 points more than when we just asked Carter versus Ford. So, and all of that was in the North, where the vote was so close. So if Jimmy Carter yesterday had run 2 points behind Gerald Ford in the North, he would have lost the election. So
if Mondale helped, did Dole actually hurt?
Everything we could read out of this election, Barbara, showed that Bob Dole came through as kind of a heavy. He was sort of the hatchet man. Maybe he was cast in that role, but he did a lot in that debate, which he lost to Mondale 55 to 29%, to confirm, at least in the minds of voters, that he was this kind of fella.
We've talked, and others have talked about Jimmy Carter putting together the old Roosevelt New Deal coalition. Was that what it was, or were there any new elements in the way this thing went?
Harry, Carter really didn't succeed in that. He didn't get the Catholic vote. It broke 50-50. Normally that should have been 60-40 Democratic. And the Jewish vote was only 54 to 45% for Carter. That's very poor showing. With those groups, the religious issue, that is their worry about this fundamentalism of Jimmy Carter, did cut. But to compensate for that, Carter went not just south, but around the country to the largest single Protestant religious denomination today, the White Baptists, and he swept that vote 57 to 43%.
How about blacks in the coalition?
Then you had white Southerners fundamentally voting for Jimmy Carter, and the other strongest group he had were blacks. Now, these are the antagonists in the civil rights race questions that have so divided America. Jimmy Carter, a white Southerner, was capable of combining those two groups into his basic base.
Did Eugene McCarthy make any difference in this race?
Well, Eugene McCarthy only got 0.8% of the total national vote, and yet he came within an eyelash of upsetting the apple cart. Had he been on the ballot in New York, for example, he might have cost Carter New York's 41 electoral votes, and there went the election. In many states, such as Oregon, where he got 4%, he was the difference. So McCarthy was a factor. I'm sure it's his swan song in American politics, Barbara, but he's gone out as having left his mark. Controversial, but that's the way he always was.
Thank you very much, Lou. We'll try it again in 4 years.
Good, Harry. We'd be delighted to be here.
In London today, Madame Tussauds' famous Waxworks Museum wasted no time in taking out the head of Gerald Ford from its group of American presidents. 4 hours after the British learned that Jimmy Carter had won the election, a wax portrait of Carter went on display. Ford's waxwork has been sent to a storeroom. Sic transit Gloria Mundi, or Wednesday in this case. That's the news for Barbara and me. Good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, sales for the third.
8 hours and 4 minutes. Amazing.
9 hours and 6 minutes. Fantastic. Introducing remarkable new Vicks Sinex long-acting nasal spray. Unlike regular sprays, new Sinex helps unblock stuffy noses and decongest sinus openings up to 10 hours.
10 hours, incredible.
The game?
No, my nasal spray.
Sinex long-acting nasal spray, new from Vic.
What does it take to start the wheels of American industry rolling? It takes machines, men, and money. That's where savings and loans come in. Money you save with us goes back into your community in the form of home loans. The savings and loan commitment to housing generates over $100 million a day for jobs, goods, and services. Help keep America rolling by having your savings account at your savings and loan.
Mutual Insurance Company of Tennessee was founded to protect the things Tennesseans value most. We are a Tennessee company, and the money invested in insurance with us stays in Tennessee, creating new jobs and new opportunities. Mutual Insurance Company of Tennessee, for the protection you need and the service you deserve.
Mutual Insurance Company. This is Tennessee.
For all your insurance needs, contact